Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for our educational webinar series. Today, we're going to talk about achieving some awesome return rates. So thanks for joining us. As you can see, 70%. So stay tuned. It's going to be awesome. As always, you know the drill, you guys. Listen only mode, meaning you can hear us, we cannot hear you. So please raise your hand, ask questions along the way by using that control panel that you have right there. What we are going to do is record this. So everything you're hearing right now is already being recorded. We will have it to you along with some special offers from some of our sponsors within the next 24 hours. So please just stay online with us, hang out for as long as you can. If not, we will get you the recording and follow along online using #OurDaily. And as I mentioned, our special sponsors, here they are, special thanks. Glassdoor and Yellow. Please go check them both out online. We are going to be sending you some special stuff from them within the next 24 hours, so stay tuned. We really appreciate their sponsoring and making this all possible. Today's expert is Natalie Breece from thredUP. Natalie has done a webinar for us before, and we liked her so much we begged her to come back, and she obliged. So thank you, Natalie. You're also going to hear Ryan Leary in the background and myself moderating some questions. So when you hear some of the voices from above, that is us bothering Natalie. So without further ado, I'm actually going to hand it to Natalie. She's going to tell us a little bit about herself and thredUP, and then we'll get started. There you go, Natalie.
Thanks, Alexis. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me back. As she mentioned, I am Director of Talent Acquisition at thredUP. If you haven't heard of thredUP, we are actually the largest online thrift store and consignment shop in the world for women and kids clothing. So what makes us a bit unique is we are what's called a managed marketplace. So two really unique sides to our business. One side is the supply side. If you have clothes in your closet you would like to purge, we have a really cool kit called the Clean Out Kit. It's a hamper-sized plastic bag, comes with prepaid shipping label. You fill it with everything you want to get rid of from your closet, all of your clothes, handbags, jewelry, shoes. Put it on the front porch and give it to your mail carrier, and then it lands at one of our distribution centers where we go through all of that inventory, we photograph it, we merchandise it on our site, and then really make it easy and seamless for our customers to shop the site. And everything comes in really neat packaging, very much like what you would receive from a boutique. So very different secondhand experience. We have about 1,300 employees across the country and internationally. We have really two different sides to our business. One side is the corporate side, which we're hiring in San Francisco primarily. And those are all of the strategic roles behind the scenes, making the site operate seamlessly every single day. The other side is our operations side of the business, which is focused on, it's in the distribution centers and helping us delight the customers by getting packages out on time, inventory on the site quickly, and making sure we have the right mix of product for our customers. So I've been with thredUP for about 2 years. When I joined, there was no existing TA function at all, which is hard to believe. The company was is now about 8 years old. And so I have 11 people on my team that split between those at corporate and recruiters on site at each one of our distribution centers.
That is awesome, Natalie. So hey everybody, Ryan Leary here from Recruiting Daily. Natalie, before we get started, the last time you presented, you gave us the overview of the company, and I told my wife and I promised we were going to do all this stuff and clean out our house, and we never did it. And so that was a good reminder. Thank you.
You know, people all the time say, you know, thanks a lot for introducing me to thredUP. My wife's going to spend all of our money on thredUP. And I always argue them and say, look, I'm saving your money because you're now shopping at 80% off retail if she's shopping on thredUP versus at a department store.
No, I hear you. So your story, we were talking the other day, your story is really, really interesting. So we're talking about texting, right? Or some, that'll be part of it. So 70% return on your recruitment campaigns. Off the top, we get a lot of feedback from when we started to promote the webinar. That's insane. How does that happen? That's ridiculous. What are they doing? So for everyone on the call, we're going to go through that process. We're going to step through it with Natalie. She's an amazing storyteller, and so you should enjoy this. I'm not going to talk too much. I'm just going to kind of probe along and ask some of those questions that you guys are asking. So load up the questions. We're going to run this more of a Q&A. We're going to grab them right out of the questions box there and ask those through. But Natalie, before we get started, the big question, what was the problem that you were trying to solve for? Because we're going to talk about text messaging now. So what was the problem that you were trying to solve for when you began to integrate texting into your recruiting process? What drove that for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Ryan, just kind of going back, I totally hear that folks are going to be a little bit speculatory about us being able to have a 70% response rate. And I think a lot of times people think text messaging is we're asking your recruiters to pick up their phone and send text from their phone on behalf of the company. And this is so different, which you'll see. But for us, really the aha moment it occurred within our operations side of the business. And I've got 5 dedicated recruiters who sit within our DCs, and each one has really large hiring goals. And when I say large hiring goals, we are looking to hire between 20 and 30 people per week in each one of those buildings. So we're looking to hire about 150 people every week. And so when we were kind of tasked with that, the first thing I thought about is what can we do to get candidates into the funnel quickly? And how do we expand our outreach efforts, which is probably the biggest time suck for recruiters. And so it was looking at what is the length of time. So traditionally recruiters are going to send emails, they're sending in mails, they're reaching out via kind of those channels. But what happens there is you're kind of waiting. I think a lot of people check their email, but they're not checking their email as quickly as they're checking their text messages. And so sometimes you're waiting 12, 24, 48 hours to get a response from an email. And so we started kind of digging into some other ways that we can get in front of a candidate where they're kind of living every day, which is on their phones, and I think primarily in text. So for us, it was about like that piece of it. And then once we started using it, it was like immediate kind of a moment where we were like, wow, this really works. And how did we ever function without it? So we vetted a couple of different services. There's, I think they're all platform based, which makes it a lot easier where the recruiters can do it straight from their computers. They can do it from their phones. But like I mentioned, we have a recruiter at each distribution center. We also have a recruiting operations partner who helps move candidates through that funnel as well through text. And then it allows us to focus on less on that initial outreach piece and more on once we've got a candidate engaged, then we can really assess quality and make sure that's somebody we want to move forward with.
Okay, perfect. So let's jump into process and execution. I'll go between both of these slides here. I know we're not going to stick to the slides necessarily, but we do have a lot of questions coming in around tech that you're using, process that you're using, etiquette behind texting. Do you want to get into that now, or do you want to run through some process stuff and execution and then get into some of the tactics?
I think maybe we go through some of the execution because that may help answer some of those questions. And then whatever we don't answer, we can kind of come back to.
Awesome.
How does that sound?
Yeah, that sounds good to me. So let's talk about execution. Some of the challenges or some of the problems that we're hearing from companies that are trying to implement texting in their recruiting process is actually pretty basic. Where are you infusing this into the process? What are the 3 or 4 kind of areas they can use texting as a stopgap to help alleviate some of those problems that they may be experiencing? And then the tech behind that. How are they, or what tech should they be considering to use?
Sure. So I think it'll be surprising, and it was really surprising for us initially that you can use text at any stage in the funnel. So I think at the top of the funnel, it's really great because it allows you to get in front of a candidate immediately and a large number of them very quickly. But it's helpful at every stage because we use it for scheduling, which I'll show an example of that. Once a candidate comes on site with us, we use it for follow-up too, and letting them know we're excited about them and want to move forward. And then to keep them engaged all the way through if we potentially make an offer and have them go through onboarding. So you can use it really all the way through. And what you'll find is candidates are pretty receptive to that. In fact, we get a lot of feedback that they find it to be a lot more personable with their recruiter. Like they start to get to know them a little bit better because it just feels a little bit more casual. But also that they feel like they were in constant communication. It was easy to be in constant communication with the recruiter because text is just such a kind of innate thing for most people. And your next question, Ryan, was the tech that we're using for this.
Yes.
So we looked at a couple of different solutions, and we ended up landing with a company called Text Recruit. The reason we went with Text Recruit, and you'll see this a bit further along in the webinar, but they have a couple of different products. One is the texting platform, which allows us to engage candidates that we have identified. But the other one is something called Text Apply, which allows us to utilize short codes that puts our candidates through a sequence that then to apply for an opportunity, and then puts them directly in front of a recruiter versus having to go through using an email or a URL to apply for a role. And it was great for advertising, which I'll show later on.
Got it. So let me ask a couple of these questions that are coming in so we don't get too backed up. When you began to implement texting, when you decided it was time to go this route, what are some of the biggest challenges that you faced, and what are some ways that you overcame those challenges?
So I think initially it was so foreign to the team that you always have those issues with adoption, where I think some folks are a bit apprehensive. Some of the recruiters were so kind of set in their ways of just using email as their primary mode of communication, or phone calls. And so I had one recruiter on my team in particular who was really jazzed about the idea of doing this, and she was kind of my early adopter, and immediately saw some success, and started sharing out to the rest of the team like what her best practices were, how it was effective for her, and she's really great with data, so she was starting to put together like charts of how much quicker she was moving candidates through her pipeline, how it was impacting her time to fill, and then from there everybody kind of jumped on board and started to see success quickly. I think what helps is it's pretty easy to use, at least the platform we use is. So you try it once or twice, and I think immediately you're like, wow, this is a game changer. So we kind of had one of those moments with a recruiter that was really excited to try it.
Got it. And we have a few questions coming in, and this kind of, I think, goes into process here. I guess it could touch on execution as well. How do you have your recruiters set up so that I guess let's back up. Let me ask that question in a moment. Let's maybe clarify something for a few people. Where have you integrated it into your process?
So we utilize it at every stage in our process. If that's the question, like at what stage in the funnel are we using it?
Yes.
Okay, so I would say the majority of it, or the largest usage, is at the beginning. So we are fortunate, we do have a pretty healthy pipeline of candidates that apply for opportunities in many of our markets. So we use it as our initial outreach tactic to those folks. But once we've reached out and we've got them in our process and they're interviewing, we will use it. It's used every day by our recruiting operations partner to interact with our candidates as they move through the funnel. And then even when we are talking to them about their first day, we'll send them a text and say, hey, we're so excited to get you started on Monday. Make sure you check your email. There's some important information for you for orientation. And then we always include a call to action. So we'll even do things like, like, please confirm you received this, or some of the recruiters will do fun things and say, respond with woohoo that you're excited to start. So we really do use it at every stage.
Very nice. So how do your recruiters handle responses? You said they're not using their phone, they're using the platform, I'm assuming, right? Walk us through. What does that look like?
Yep. So there is an extension on their Chrome browser where they have that really open all day, and they're able to see incoming messages and respond right there. They do have an app, so they will put it on their phone as well, and will respond that way if they want to. But the majority of all of the correspondence is occurring right there on their MacBooks that they're using all day through that Chrome extension.
Okay, so I know we have a lot of process slides here, so I don't want to get, or little example slides, I should say, so I don't want to get too deep into these questions, but I do want to ask a couple more. I think they're relevant right here, and they seem to be coming in droves here. It's about boundaries. Where and how do you set boundaries? What is that line that you are using with your team in terms of what they can and cannot text, and how often they're texting them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for us, there are some boundaries already set in with the technology. So, and this question comes up a lot, like, what if a candidate doesn't want to hear from you? So there is every candidate has the ability to opt out. So it'll let them know that right away, that if they want to stop receiving messages from us, all they have to do is text stop, and they'll automatically stop receiving messages. It'll notify us on our end within the platform that we can no longer text message that candidate. Doesn't come up a whole lot. I would say it's less than, I would say definitely less than 5% of the time. But then we also have set up time restrictions too. So we don't want to be texting a candidate too early in the morning, too late in the evening. So if they try to send a message outside of that designated time frame, it'll flag it and let them know that that's outside of the time frame that they're allowed to text. It'll save that message for the next day, and then they can resend it. In terms of the etiquette and like how we're communicating with candidates, I think fortunately with my team, I think everybody's professional, and we don't really have a lot of issues with them texting things they shouldn't be. There are restrictions around it needing to be 140 characters, so at times they'll use abbreviations for words to be able to send a text. But really, it's all that dialogue is about them, coming into interview, and it's pretty short and sweet, and then congratulatory messages at times when they're starting a new position.
Got it. Now, are you using this? So we're talking a lot about the process of scheduling, interviewing, and moving people through the funnel. Are you using this at the top of the funnel when candidates are applying in droves, or maybe even not applying, where you're doing some outreach to candidates in the ATS or in your CRM that haven't applied to a specific position?
So yes, so even if they haven't applied to that specific position, we would still use text. Now we don't use it like for sourcing efforts. If it's like we're sourcing passive talent, we probably wouldn't use this. I think this is more for those that have already expressed some sort of interest in thredUP, whether it's to that position or any position with us, to start a conversation. And then from there, we'll continue to have that dialogue. Or if we start to see that they're not as responsive via text, then we'll take that cue and we'll move it to email. But I will say 99% of the time, candidates really like being able to interact with us via text, because the conversations happen a little bit quicker. I think it's kind of what's happened in a lot of companies where they've kind of moved from email to Slack or other types of instant messaging platforms, because it just kind of elicits a faster response.
Yeah, no, I can totally see that. Let's talk about quality, measuring quality. Do you have a hard time tracking information on text? For example, email. A recruiter can go back and search through email threads. On an ATS, they can go back and search through notes and different notations from other recruiters or themselves throughout the conversation. How is that handled? And this is also a question that came in. How is that handled when using texting?
So we do use text in tandem with our ATS. So we would still put notes in a candidate's profile in our ATS, so that we don't have an issue there. And then in terms of the history, text is actually really great for that, or the platform we use is really great for that, because we have an entire history of a conversation that occurred, and dates and times between our recruiters and the candidate. So if at any point in time, we sometimes will have a candidate that will text us out of the blue, asking if we have an opportunity. We can go back through that history and say, oh, this person no-showed for an interview, or this person was unprofessional in their correspondence in the past, and then from there make a decision that we don't want to move forward with them. So we still have the same type of history that you would have in email or any other communication channel that you're using.
Got it. All right, let's jump into the tactical side of this. I want to show people examples. I know people are filming here to see what this thing looks like, what your communications look like, how you're moving people through the funnel, and then obviously that big hairy number we put up there, 70% return rate. So walk us through the next couple of slides, and just let me know when you want me to change slides through these examples. And if you could, let's get into the process that you're using and maybe some campaign examples to where you're receiving these high numbers of return.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is an example I thought was really interesting to share. This occurred just last week when I was sitting with a recruiter in our Atlanta distribution center, where we were going through our ATS looking for candidates that we could invite to come on site to interview later that week. So this is one where Kishana Payne reached out to this candidate named Joseph. and let him know we received his application and we'd like to invite him to interview. She did that at 12:49 p.m. At 12:50 p.m. he responded, yes, I'm available. And then if you look through the entire sequence, 2 minutes later, she says, wonderful, we're having interviews tomorrow at 10 a.m. Does that work for you? Yes, that's perfect. Great. Please indicate that I'm your recruiter when you sign in. So that, between 12:49 and 12:59, we have gotten that candidate scheduled to come on site to interview. He asks what he needs to bring to the interview. We tell him what he needs. So she can respond really quick, as you see, like he asked, is there anything I need to bring to be prepared? Little over an hour, she responds with, bring 2 copies of your 2 forms of ID and your resume. And then he came on site and interviewed that very next day, received a job offer from us, and is in the onboarding stage to get started next week. So in a volume environment like ours, where we're trying to target 20 to 30 starts per week, I'd argue that there's no faster way to communicate with a candidate than this way. We've never seen this type of response on a regular basis with email. And for the candidate, I think they feel comfortable to come back to us and say, is there anything I need to do to be prepared? And we can have those quick conversations with them. So, and this is not a rare circumstance. This is a common occurrence for us and our ability to connect with them very quickly.
Now, we're not trying to, I know we're not, the webinar is not pushing any specific software or tech here, just so everyone knows, around texting. But I think this is a crucial point in today's session. You mentioned you've never received or seen the return rates on email the same as you're seeing it here on text. Just give us an idea, and I know you don't have these numbers off the top of your head, and maybe you do. Some of the maybe in percents, where's email versus texting in your response rates here? Maybe a number of days that might be easier for you.
So generally, when we send an email, it takes closer to between 12 and 24 hours to get a response. I think 12 is optimistic. I think a lot of times it's more like 24 hours, and sometimes it's even longer. I think part of that could be the demographic that we're targeting for a lot of these opportunities are just not in email a whole lot. So we probably use text for 90% of our communication with the candidates now. I think really the only thing we send via email is going to be instructions for their first day or links to complete paperwork to get started. Other than that, everything occurs via email or via text because we've just seen the candidates really be receptive to it.
Got it. Now we do have a question coming in that's probably relevant to this slide here. It's around vetting candidates. Have you found it harder to vet underqualified candidates using texting? I'm not sure that it matters because you're using it now from a sourcing perspective, but I want you to answer that question.
Yeah, so we do the vetting on the front end. So before we would reach out to them, we've looked at the resume, and then in this environment, this high volume environment, our vetting process is a bit different because we generally will bring them on site to interview, and then they'll meet with a recruiter once they come on site versus doing like a phone screen, which is the more traditional method. So we've done our work on the front end, which is looking at the resume, work history, and before we're making that initial contact.
Got it. Okay, perfect. So let's move on here into the progression, and I'll let you walk us through these examples here.
Yeah, so this is just an example of kind of what our response rate looks like, response time looks like, and this is over the period of a couple of months. So, and I'll get into that number that they floated to, which is in the 70s, but here, this just shows you how many messages we're able to send over a couple of months too. So our team collectively, which is between 10 recruiters, had sent 90,000 messages over that period of time. And for us to send 90,000 messages that with a 55% response rate, I think that's pretty darn good. And with the response time, under 10 hours. So we have a lot of situations where it's much quicker than that, but for 90% or 90,000 messages to have, an average of 10 hours or less, I think is really what's been critical for us to be able to hire at the volume we need to. And what's great here is we can kind of see historically, like when we're seeing better responses, if we start to see big dips, when that's occurring. For the most part, if you look at this graph, I know it's a little bit difficult to see, but the line on top is messages sent. The line on the bottom is responses. For the most part, we don't see like any huge dips in responses, which is good. That means we're kind of chugging along at the same rate that we want to. It gives us kind of a good pulse check on where we're sitting with the response rate and how many messages we're sending.
Good. You want me to go to the next slide there? Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great. And then here's an example of a campaign that was run by one of the recruiters where we had a 74% response time in 1 hour. And this is really common. This is when we're reaching out to them, letting them know that we're excited, that we want to bring them on board. We're excited to have them start their new career with us. And like I mentioned before, we'll say, please check your email for all the info. And then, of course, the call to action is critical. Please text back yes if you received it. Thank you. And then, when we send these kind of communication, which is every day, candidates respond really, they're excited to get those messages. And then it kind of prompts them to go look and check their email if they need to in certain circumstances. But, we're able to constantly see those response rates increasing and the candidates really receptive to it. And you can move forward, Ryan. And then to talk a little bit about the short code. So that's the other piece of the puzzle here, is not only using text to do your candidate outreach, but I think text is a great way to allow candidates to apply for your opportunities. I think more and more people are looking for the easiest way to get information, the most convenient way to get information. And again, they're kind of living on their phone. So how do we make it easier for a candidate to get in touch with us? So we've developed a short code that's text thredUP to 97211. And what you're seeing here on the left-hand side is our ad that we run on Facebook. We run in specific markets that we're really looking to increase our candidate volume, make it really easy for them to apply. And this in particular example is for our supervisor openings. The one on the right you're seeing is an ad that we're running on Spotify. So once a candidate texts that number, what happens is they go through a sequence where immediately they get a response back that says, thank you so much for your interest in thredUP. If you're interested in a role in a distribution center, text 1. If it's retail, text 2, and so on. And then they text that, and then they give us the location. And then as soon as they go through that sequence, and they get a response from a recruiter that says, hi, this is Natalie at thredUP. We're so excited to chat with you. I'll be in touch soon. And then that message lands in the inbox for our recruiters through the text platform, that they can immediately start that conversation. So where I think in a lot of times candidates, they apply and then they kind of feel like they're going into this black hole. Like, where's my application? When am I going to hear from somebody? With this, they text and it's within 15 seconds they get a response back. We received your application and we're excited to chat with you. And then they get that personalized response from the recruiter within a minute. So we've seen really great results with this. And as we continue to work with our marketing team to promote our opportunities, we've turned to the short code a lot more than any of the other things we used in the past with URLs and email addresses and so on.
Yeah, it's a great example. We're getting some questions around hiring events, college recruiting, using this in college recruiting and career fairs. Not sure that you're using it there. Or did you have any experience using it in career fairs?
Yes, we use it quite a bit in career fairs, especially, the short codes all the time. And we generally will be a little more prescriptive for the candidates. So if we're at a career fair for specific types of opportunities, then we'll actually tell them, you're going to text thredUP to 97211, select option 2. So they know exactly what to do to get in touch with a recruiter. And then the recruiter kind of has a heightened awareness that we're at a career fair and to make sure to respond to those right away. So we definitely use these in events, and especially when there's going to be a high volume of applicants.
Right. Okay, good. So we have all the questions coming in around career fairs, around events, things like that. After the webinar, we're definitely going to be sending out the recording. I know there's a ton of information. You're going to get the slide deck. Lex in the beginning mentioned that we will have some offers coming out from some of the sponsors that are on here today. One of those is going to be a chance to see a recruiting app, a mobile recruiting app, I should say, that will help you achieve this. Okay, so it ties in nicely with a lot of the questions that we're getting. You can use it in a number of different scenarios. So check your inbox after that, and we'll make sure that you get some visibility there and able to see that. So Natalie, for texting as part of the process, what would you say the impact has been on candidate experience from how things were happening? Well, I guess 2 years ago, you didn't even have a TA function. So maybe help the audience understand, obviously, a bad candidate experience or really none at all, to kind of what that evolution looked like when you joined and how you've changed that experience or enhanced it when you started to use something a little more modern like texting.
Yeah, so we've made changes across a lot of our different processes, especially for the operation side, which is the high volume recruiting that we're doing. And we've seen the improvement in a couple of different ways. One, we've seen it internally in our time to fill, with us averaging prior to doing this around 11 days or so for a candidate to get through our entire process. Now we're averaging more like 7 days to get through our process. And we run about once a month, we'll run chat sessions with our new hires where they get to meet with some members of the leadership team, HR, and recruiting. And we ask them a bunch of questions around their process and getting started with us. What comes up almost every single time is how they had never worked with a recruiter that was so responsive. And we always ask them, why do you think that the recruiter was so responsive? And a lot of times they say, because they were so easy to get a hold of. I just would send a text and they would respond right back. And so I think that's helped us a lot with them feeling like, we really are there to work with them and be responsive towards them. But then also, I think it helps build that engagement piece too, where they feel like they've got somebody at the company that they can reach at any point in time. And once they get started, we see that they're excited about the culture, but they also have like this existing relationship with the recruiter in a way that's different from what I'd seen before. So, we've done a lot of different things to try to enhance the candidate experience. Like you mentioned before, we didn't really have any processes in place. And this is one that when we think back, we just implemented this about a year ago. And I look back and it's one of those questions where I'm like, I don't know how we functioned before without it, because it has made such a big difference in our ability to work efficiently, but also for our candidates to be able to feel like they're getting a unique experience with us every time they apply.
What about your recruiter experience? So when you guys are out at events or anywhere really, when the recruiters are using a platform like this, or just texting in general, and they're not going back to the inbox, not having to check 400 emails a day, what has that done to your team as far as their experience is concerned?
So our team, I think because of some of these things that have previously been like a bottleneck for them, have just become highly efficient. And we've had months over this year, our goals have continued to be really large, and the company's scaling, where we've been able to hire with a team of 5 recruiters, being able to hire 500 people in a month. I don't think was ever conceivable. And in fact, we weren't there a year ago, but we're there now. And we look back at this year thus far, we've hired more people in our distribution centers in the first 4 months, so not including May, than we did all of 2017. And I really attribute it to a lot of these types of resources that we've used, because they've helped from an efficiency standpoint. Even our board is like baffled that with a team of this size, we're able to deliver to this magnitude. But it's because you create efficiencies in the parts of the process that are generally the most labor intensive. And I think the outreach and the scheduling, we also use tools to help with scheduling, all make it just that much easier for you to connect with a candidate quickly. Versus doing a lot of the back and forth communication.
Got it. Now you said this was integrated into your process is integrated into your ATS, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so you're able to track the recruiter's activity, the candidate's journey, all the way through from what they're doing outside the system back into the system from a reporting perspective.
Yes, absolutely. And with the extension that I mentioned previously, when they're sourcing on other sites, so if they're sourcing on Indeed or reviewing applicants on Indeed, it immediately will post, the phone number will come up in green, so it's clickable, or if they're on Glassdoor, it's clickable. So it's really, really helpful for the team to be able to reach out to folks right then and there when they're looking at a resume.
Got it. Perfect. Okay, so a couple questions about internal usage, and let me jump back into the slide that they're referring to here. Internal use. How are you using texting internally?
So we use it so we've given our HR team access to this as well. So how we'll use it internally is they'll do check-ins with employees. So if they have a group of new hires that started 2 weeks before, they will shoot them a text and say, this is so and so at this distribution center. Just wanted to check in and see how your first couple weeks have been. Are there any questions I can answer for you? So again, going back to that accessibility piece, they're kind of used to it because they've went through the process using text with recruiting, and then it makes a lot of sense for just to seamlessly transition that with HR to be able to communicate with them as well. Or if there's some sort of inclement weather issue, we'll use it then too, because we've got all of their information in our database and their phone numbers are already in the system from being communicated to during the initial candidate outreach piece. So we just kind of continue to use it for those types of communications also.
Got it. Now, as far as outreach and engaging with candidates, I know you're not doing this from a cold outreach perspective, so there are a lot of questions around that, or using this from a cold outreach. This is not for cold outreach. This is for people who have expressed interest, or they're at an event and they're taking that information and then moving them through the funnel, through the scheduling process, through the interviewing process, and things like that as they bring them on site for interviews.
Primarily, yes. I think there will be times where if we're sourcing on some of the job boards that we know that those are candidates that are active job seekers, we'll use it then. We won't use it for passive outreach though. So for like a more passive site like LinkedIn, we probably wouldn't use it there. But on some of the job boards, we will try it from time to time and see what kind of response we get.
Okay. Now, how has that response been for you?
Generally, it's pretty. Generally, we get a quick response. Now, whether it's going to be I'm an interested response or I'm not, that's probably about 50-50. But if the overall goal is to get a response quickly, we definitely get a response much quicker than we would if we were to send an email.
Got it. Okay. So I have a handful of questions around probably more the tactical run through here. How many texts max should be sent to a candidate, and how often can a text be sent without antagonizing the recipient?
So we generally will reach out like 3 times. If we don't get a response by the 3rd time, then we'll stop at that point. But we don't really have, I think because it's so easy for candidates to respond, we don't have a lot of situations where we have to do a ton of follow-up. Generally, by the 2nd attempt, they'll say, I'm no longer interested. I took a job opportunity somewhere else, and then we stop from there. So I think, but max 3, and I think you want to space those out. We're not sending a bunch of texts in the same day. We'll send one day, maybe one at the beginning of the week, one at the end of the week, maybe one the following week, and then we kind of let it go from there. And then sometimes we'll reach out to somebody and we won't hear back from them, and then they'll respond a couple weeks later, and then we decide at that point if it's a candidate that we want to re-engage or not.
Very good. Now, time of day. And email is still very popular, right? And everyone's always talking about the best time of day to email people. When is it going to hit the inbox? What's the most likely time people are going to open and engage with an email? Where are we at with texting? Is there a specific time of day? Evening, morning, night, afternoon? What time of day is best to get a response?
Great question. So we generally find the best response rate is like first thing in the morning, like around 8 in the morning when people are on their way to work or just getting settled in at work. We get a really great response rate in the middle of the day, like around noon when people are on lunch and they're on their phone. And then we'll do some in the evening, like 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. And then generally after that, we don't get as great of a response. So we will actually schedule text to go out the next morning, like around 8 a.m. So it's the first thing they see before they start their day.
Got it. Very good. And I'm going to go one more question here. How long do you wait for a response from a candidate before you give up?
Like I said, we'll usually do like the 3 attempts, and then if we don't hear anything within 3 attempts, then we generally will leave them alone. If it's a week since our last outreach, then at that point we'll generally leave them alone because text is so easy to respond to. I think the grace period we give is a little bit shorter because we figure if they haven't responded to us in a week, then they're probably not interested in the role. And like I said, sometimes they'll come back. But we'll just kind of move on at that point to other candidates in our pipeline.
Got it. Fantastic. Well, Natalie, this has been fantastic. I know we're short and sweet today. We've got a lot of questions that came in. This is a great story, and everyone is loving the information that came out today. For everyone that is on the call, again, we did record the session, so everybody will get it. That's always a very popular question. You'll get the deck as well. We also have a couple of things we're going to send you through email, not texting. We're going to email you, but so check your inbox in a bit. We do have a special offer from Glassdoor that everyone should take a peek at and certainly take advantage of. And then if you want to see all of this in action, Yellow, who is one of our sponsors today, handles all of this. So get in line, see the demo, see the tech, and evaluate it for yourself. See if it's something that could potentially fit into your process. It's something that you're going to need to consider, if not today, then in the next year, coming, that next couple of years. So certainly give these things a look. Natalie, thank you so much. Great information. And thank you to everybody for showing up today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was fun.
Yeah, no, definitely. We'll talk to everybody soon. Thank you for showing up.
Bye-bye.